All right, well, it's three after. I'm sure folks will continue to catch up with us and we'll welcome them then. But I want to welcome everybody to our annual Real Estate Developers Forum. I'm Alfred Sanchez. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. Today's real estate event is brought to you by our Real Estate Committee, chaired by Mark Ains and vice chaired by Carol Ellis Cutler. And the event chair is Kevin Michael. So we really want to thank all of them for their leadership in putting this together. Today's event is made possible through the generous donations of Ocean Bank, FIU, Grant Thornton, and Thornton Construction Company. And we really thank all of you for making it possible to put this incredibly insightful and I think going to be fun event. Ensuring the future of Miami development is an important focus of the Greater Miami Chamber and especially of its Real Estate Committee's initiatives. Today's webinar will be discussing the COVID-19 impact that it's had on the real estate industry and how the future overall will be changing because of that. We're also going to be focusing on topics such as the future of commercial real estate, mixed use properties, i.e. office spaces, et cetera. The healthcare technology, telehealth, healthcare real estate industry, the education real estate, and future of online learning on college campuses. Now we'll hear from amazing panelists and industry experts, Coralie Penabad from UrbanX, Christopher Blair from University of Miami, and Kathleen Moorman from Baptist of South Florida. As they discuss the realities of healthcare, education, and real estate on mixed-use properties, I think it'll be an extremely important conversation, and we're very lucky to have moderating that conversation the business editor of the Miami Herald, Jane Wooldridge, is a great friend of ours for a couple of decades, only to age myself, Jane, not you, and also has been greatly involved in the chamber for many, many years. So we thank Jane for being here. Before I turn it over to Mark to begin the program, let me run through some of the logistics as we always do. Everyone's mic is muted. Please use the chat function, as I was telling you earlier, to really network with one another, to drop an idea. If you want to drop a link to something that you want to share with folks, use that feature. That's what it's there for. If you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function because only those are going to be looked at and floated up to our panelists. So please make sure to use that. If you put them in the chat, they're likely going to go unread. The webinar today is being recorded, and we're going to post that recording later on our website, so look for that later. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of our real estate committee, Mark Ains. He's been in the sale of business development arena for over 30 years, beginning his career in commercial real estate in and around the New York City area. So he kind of was a trailblazer for everybody who's coming down now. Mark's gained experience in all facets of the industry from brokerage to ground up development. So we really have someone who's got a broad experience in the real estate industry. We're lucky to have his guidance and his leadership. Mark, I welcome you and I yield the floor.
Thanks, Alfred. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that intro. And it's like 21 years now and counting. I've been down here as a blazer of trails or paths, if you will. It's been a pleasure so far to serve as the chair of the Real Estate Committee. We're excited for the program that we've planned for you guys today. As Alfred mentioned, we've assembled 3 great speakers for our panel. Our discussion will be focusing on the realities and the future of real estate in Miami. And I'd love to send a huge thank you to my vice chair, Carol Ellis Cutler, as well as my chair of this developers forum, who stepped up in a big way, Kevin Michael, along with the rest of the task force for making this event possible. And of course, a special thank you to our sponsors, FIU Business School, Grant Thornton, Thornton Construction, and of course, Ocean Bank, who's been with the chamber and sponsoring the real estate committee for many, many, many years now. Now, as the current chairman of the real estate committee, I'm committed to providing our members with the ability to continue to engage with their fellow committee members, with the ability to engage with and chamber guests in a safe and productive manner. Now, these are definitely some interesting and crazy times we're all going through right now. And to say that this past year has been challenging is a total understatement. I hear the word COVID-19 and I cringe. It's a dirty word in my book now. I'm not afraid of a challenge. So our next event, which will be coming in 2021, which would be the 2021 Real Estate Summit and Real Awards. So stay tuned for this in the coming months. We'll announce when that's happening. Deemed as an essential business, coastal construction has really been extremely busy during these crazy times. We've been fortunate. Although some projects that were supposed to start in 2020 did get bumped due to the pandemic. And now we're actually seeing them get pushed into 2021 and beyond. So things are starting to really crank up, as they say. And that's on top of just many, many projects of all sizes that we've been looking at from different developers, a lot of which are coming down from the Northeast, as well as other cold temperatured areas. Now, Coastal prides ourselves on providing our clients with the highest level quality of work possible, project early or on time, and on or below budget. So finally, I know I speak for everyone at the chamber and everyone on the real estate committee when I wish only good health, good fortune, and great success to all of you, no matter what business you're in. As I mentioned, our sponsors, Ocean Bank, we greatly appreciate them for being the event sponsor of the Real Estate Developers Forum. And I want to hand it over to Manny now. Manuel Manny Del Canal from Ocean Bank. The floor is yours. The virtual floor is yours, Manny. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it very much. I'm here at the beach, listening to this great conference. Actually, I wish I was at the beach. Very briefly, Ocean Bank is again proud to support the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. I believe we just celebrated, Alfred, our 37th year of chamber membership. And considering that we were founded 38 years ago, that really speaks to the commitment that we have to the chamber. And we're very excited to serve as a presenting sponsor for today's Developer Forum event. With $4.6 billion in assets, Ocean Bank is the largest independent state chartered commercial bank headquartered in Florida. We have continued to serve the South Florida community in this very challenging year, as Mark was saying. On the lending side so far, I was looking at our numbers yesterday in preparation for this event. Ocean Bank's close to $900 million in between new loans and advances and additional funds to South Florida borrowers. And many of those are financing real estate projects, including a recent deal for $60 million, securing a portfolio of South Florida investor properties. So yes, even in this pandemic year, Ocean Bank has remained very, very active supporting commercial real estate in South Florida and will continue to do so. We also participated, as many of you know, in the Paycheck Protection Program. We originated over 1,300 of these loans, totaling over $180 million to South Florida businesses. And we're estimating, based on the applications for these loans, that we helped support the retention of over 30,000 jobs in South Florida. And we're very, very proud of that. If any of you or your family members or professional contacts are looking for financing, or perhaps a more personalized and beneficial banking relationship, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. I'll add my contact information to the chat string in just a moment. Thank you all once again for the opportunity to sponsor this event. Thank you to the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, and I'll turn it over to Kevin Michael of Invisio at this point. Kevin, take it away.
Thank you, Manny, and I really appreciate you being a sponsor with us today and Ocean Bank for your commitment. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Michael. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Invisio. I'm excited to be this year's chair for the annual Developers Forum, and we are tremendously pleased with the wonderful panel of speakers that we've assembled, the sponsors that have come on board to support this event, and the content that I know will come out of this that will be valuable as we discuss the future of real estate across the mixed use, healthcare, and education segments. I'm very thankful to the Real Estate Committee and its leadership for inviting me to be the chair for this year's event. And with the obligatory self-plug, I just want to mention that Invisio, we are recent chamber members, and we provide technical support, management, and consulting services as an outsourced partner to organizations in South Florida, both big and small. Technology can be very confusing for many organizations, and as we said in Invisio, if you don't get it, we get it. And when I say it, I mean IT. So today, in addition to being the event chair, I have the distinct pleasure to introduce someone who I consider to be a gem of our Miami community, and someone who I'm also very happy to call a friend, Ms. Jane Wooldridge. Jane is an award-winning travel and business journalist and longtime Miami Herald editor. For the past decade, she has led the Herald's coverage of real estate, tourism, the economy, and arts in print and digitally. She is a popular moderator and speaks frequently on the economy, arts, and media, and a frequent contributor here, of course, at the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. Jane believes in the power of art in community building and the inspirational value of travel, which many of us unfortunately cannot do right now, but we look forward to that once COVID is over. She is the immediate past president of the Society of American Travel Writers and serves on the board of directors of SATW and SATW Foundation, presenter of the prestigious Lowell Thomas Awards. Jane, we are so happy to have you today. Welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks to the committee and to the chamber. I have been hanging out at the chamber one way or another for more time than we're going to talk about, and always happy to engage with all of its members. And I'm particularly happy to talk today with our panelists about real estate, which is absolutely one of my great affections here in South Florida. And of course, we are here on Art Week. And in a normal year, I would be out running around looking at art this week. And I suspect most of you would be too. And I have to say that while I'm sorry to be missing that, and I'm getting texts from people who are out telling me what they've seen, this is a good year for me, at least, to be here with all of you. So and on the shameless plug department, as Kevin would say, the Miami Herald does have a real estate newsletter that some of you may not be aware of. It's called Resource Miami. It comes out on Mondays, and if you haven't signed up for it, please do so. So we have a terrific lineup this afternoon, and it's a different group of developers than you sometimes see on panels, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited about it, because I learn more from people I don't know as well than I do from those who I've had the opportunity to chat with a lot. So we have three terrific panelists today. We have Coralie Penabod, who is principal of UrbanX Group, which does real estate development, management, and advising. And of course, their big project right now is River Landing. We're going to be talking to Coralie more about that. We have Christopher Blair from the University of Miami, and he's the executive director for design and construction at UM. I tend to forget, and maybe some of us do as well, that universities do in fact are developers, and we think of them as educational institutions, which they certainly are, but they're also important developers and landholders in our community. And then we also have Kathleen Moorman, who is corporate vice president of real estate at Baptist Health. Baptist has been doing a lot of really interesting work in terms of its development, and looking forward to talking to her more about that. So I'm going to start, we're going to do the, I'm seeing that some people are having trouble with the audio, so I will yell louder, although if you know me, you think that it's not possible for me to be quiet. So let's start with the large part of the funnel on the consumer side, which would be Coralie. And let's talk about, first tell us more about River Landing, what's happening there, and tell us about how COVID may have affected any of your development plans, tenant mix, what's been going, what you're experiencing there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, River Landing was getting ready to deliver to many of its tenants on the eve of the pandemic. As many of you know, River Landing has 346,000 square feet of retail, approximately 149,000 square feet of office. Within that retail footprint, we had restaurants along our 28,000 square foot riverfront. And we also have our residential portion of the project, which included 528 residential apartments that are for lease. On or about February, we were getting ready to TCO our spaces, primarily starting with our grocer Publix, which has opened. And thereafter, we had our anchor tenants, which included Ross, Burlington, and Hobby Lobby that were getting ready to take their stores. At the eve of the pandemic, there was 2 issues that happened. As you know, the city closed, and therefore our ability to achieve our permits timely became problematic because of the pandemic. And then our tenants, of course, due to the fact that retail and all the opportunity to for shopping came to a halt. What I can say is that each and every one of our retailers are committed to the Miami market and worked in collaboration with us. So as well as the city of Miami, despite the COVID and the city closing and everyone working from home, we were able to achieve the project TCO for the retail side, as well as achieving the TCO for our major anchor retailers. Publix opened to the marketplace in mid-September, and they've been advising that they've been doing phenomenally well, servicing the community. Ross has opened approximately 6 weeks ago, and they have since reported that the Ross at River Landing is reporting to be number 2 in the chain. Their sales are significant. Burlington is also reporting high sales. Hobby Lobby has opened. We've also brought on board opening Five Below and Old Navy, and the sales have been strong. So despite the COVID and the difficulties, we have been able to achieve sales, and each of them are reporting they're doing well in their sales.
So here's a question that I think is going to end up going to all of the panelists today, but let's start with you. And that you were almost at TCO when the pandemic hit. Did it affect your labor supply or your ability to move? I realize that permitting stopped for a while. Everybody was slowed on that front. But in terms of your pure labor supply, was that at all affected by the pandemic? And what has happened over time as you've finished the build out?
Immediately upon the COVID affecting us, there was a small dip simply because the project had to prepare and abide by all the CDC guidelines. So we needed to be sure that we had a safe construction environment for everyone that was there and working. But we're happy to report that because River Landing was in its finishing phases, we were able to continue to work with our teams, and we were able to separate everyone and follow the CDC guidelines to be able to achieve our completion dates with our tenants. We were set to open the stores in March and April. Due to the pandemic and due to the delays in permitting, we were unable to do so until August, early September, when Publix came on board. So there were some delays. The greatest effect that we saw was with our restaurants. We had several restaurant deals that were in the works to bring in our restaurants along the riverfront, and most of those came to a pause simply due to what was happening and the unknown reality of when was this going to come to an end. Because restaurants have been so heavily impacted, and for a long period of time, they simply could not operate. We're happy to say that today, as we see the light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic, we are in negotiations with 2 restaurants, and we hope to announce our first 2 restaurants, one of our anchor restaurants that will take a corner space on our river that is a 3-level space, as well as one of the other catty corner of the project. We have those 2 leases, so we hope to announce those soon. I think seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and knowing that we expect this construction period for these restaurants, that by the time they're ready to open, we hope that this pandemic is behind us all.
Terrific. Christopher, let's move over to what has been the single biggest impact you've seen in terms of your development and building projects there at the U?
So on or about mid-March, the University of Miami quickly acted to slow down its capital projects program. And we did that in an effort to save cash on hand and make sure that we weren't overcommitting to resources. There was a lot of unknown at that time about when students were going to return. Our students left during spring break, and we had them go remote for the balance of the semester. They ended up staying off campus the entire summer semester, and we ended up returning for the fall in a hybrid scenario. So we did dual modality, we had in-person learning, and we had strictly online learning. So it was a real pivot in the capital projects program. A lot of what we were forecasting and planning on doing, if it had not already started construction or was not life safety or compliance related, we were able to shelve those projects. Some of them are still shovel ready. Some of them are basically ready to pull permits and begin once we're ready to begin spending on them. Others kind of came to a logical stopping point, and they've been put on hold until we figure out what our next steps are. It's given us some opportunities to kind of retool and re-gear and kind of rethink through the priorities here at the university. And then a lot of this summer, we spent a lot of time and effort going through our buildings, especially our older buildings, and getting them ready for the possibility of students to come back in the fall, which they did. And there was a lot of retrofits where that had to be done. So I'd say the largest effect really was a shift in our capital focus and how we wanted to spend our money. And kind of we really retracted a little bit and pulled back until we better understood what the market was going to do. And we could see that the light at the end of the tunnel.
Tell us a little bit more about those retrofits, because I think that's something that everybody is interested in thinking about. If they haven't already come up with a design solution, they're certainly pondering them.
Yeah, so one of the things obviously that affected us most is having people come to a in-person learning. We had space constraints, and we went to the 6-foot minimum separation. So there was 480 teaching spaces on campus that needed to be relaid out. We needed to provide the spacing. And what we started seeing is classroom spaces that were designed for 20 or 25 were now only holding 12 or 15 now that we've laid them out. There was significant analysis that was done throughout campus of spaces that were not traditionally teaching spaces, but how could we repurpose them to make them teaching spaces? And in addition to that came a whole level of effort where we began to explore the acoustical nature of them. Are they set up for distance learning? Are they set up for dual modality? How, accessible spaces? So there's a whole series of issues that had to be understood and then implemented over the summer, in addition to just some of the MEP type retrofits. There was, I think, just over 380 air handlers were retrofitted with enhanced filtration and blue lights that were added, the UV light, UVC for filtration and bacteriological cleansing. So.
Okay, and here is, I think, one of the questions that permeates everything that we talk about in real estate and development right now, which is, what of this do we think are permanent solutions that will be carried forward? And what do we think is short term? I was speaking with somebody the other day who said, look, in another year, nobody's even going to remember we had this because we're going to get the vaccine. And if you had a family member or who was affected, or you were directly affected, you'll remember it. But the collective consciousness will sort of give into our cultural ADD. What of this seems to you to be permanent in terms of the way that you approach development going forward?
So it's definitely affected kind of our planning on campus and our strategy. We were under the midst of a massive housing development plan, a 3-phase, $500 to $600 million housing retrofit that was going on. One of the projects that was just completing, we actually TCO'd May 8th during the pandemic. It was 535,000 square feet. It was a dorm project, 434 units, apartment suite style. So that actually provided, it was a godsend when that project delivered and was able to be occupied, because that actually provided us some flexibility on campus. We had a lot more of traditional dorm living, which is, as you know, is very kind of tight quarters and tight spaces. So that actually provided us the ability to decant a little bit. I think that's something that definitely the university has been very keen on, is understanding as we move forward that not having the spaces, for so long, and even as we look at our office environments, we've been going to open office, open office, open office. Right now we have folks that can't return to the workforce because they can't be seated in open office environments. I don't know that any hard planning decisions have yet to be made on the implications, but there are definitely lots of conversations going on. Even as far as we've gone touchless in the restrooms. but no one wants to use the hand dryers anymore. So now we're starting to look at putting potentially paper back in all the restrooms. So it's kind of been a weird pendulum shift as we've looked at the implications that have been, people are looking at when they want to return to work.
That's really interesting because I at the Miami Herald, of course, we've always had an open newsroom because that's how newsrooms function. And I have to say that when they pushed us back into an even more open scenario, I personally hated it because I don't actually want to hear every detail of the personal life of the person next to me. But now, you know, we all have to think about, well, are we going to be able to go back to open spaces that were really the predominant thought process for a number of years there in the work environment. So that will bring me actually to Kathleen. And I cannot imagine a sector that has been more affected perhaps by the needs of the COVID pandemic than at least the on-campus development of buildings and retrofits at Olive Baptist Health. So why don't you tell us more about what you've been dealing with over the last year?
So when the pandemic happened, you know, if I'll recall, you know, outpatient services and clinics, which is really the big chunk of my responsibility, closed. However, our urgent cares and our standalone emergency rooms, we continue to see patients, and we spent a lot of time setting up triages in the parking lot, working with our landlords, so we could service the community, test them, and then guide them to their next step while they recover from COVID. We also spent some time right immediately finding surge space. So we were taking our surgery centers and starting to convert them. And how that works is for you to leave the hospital and go back to, let's say, a community living situation like, you know, senior living, we would have to test you over a 48-hour period. And that would be the surge space. The good news is it never happened. We you know, we scrambled, we got it set up, it didn't happen. Then we went into, you know, we all, you know, stayed tight until about May. We reopened a lot of things. And then of course, during the summer, we had the surge again. We thought we'd have to utilize some of these facilities again in that use. And the same thing, we're able to handle it. Our numbers were very high during the summer, but we were able to continue. Now for me, and my team, the biggest thing that we did is similar to what Christopher Blair did with, you know, the University of Miami. We had to go back into our medical office buildings, and we had to set it up along with the physician groups, the surgery centers, diagnostic centers, and work around the CDC and AHCA's rules. So that was a reduced amount of patients, and we put in a lot of the different mechanisms that technology offered, just like, you know, the UM was doing. But the little bit different, you know, from Christopher, it sounded like some things, you know, were maybe put on hold. For us, we had quite a few things that are in the pipeline. We are healthcare. We pushed them along to get them open. We even had a few opportunities business-wise to open up some other facilities where we bought, you know, like say we opened up an urgent care in Boca Raton, out in the West Boca, because we didn't have a presence there. And that was an opportunity there that was unplanned. But, you know, we had the funding and we were able to pull that off. During the same period of time, we opened up a standalone emergency room along Coral Way that was under construction. During the pandemic, we were getting near the end. AHCA and construction, inspections, all these things were slowed down because of the pandemic. But once we opened our doors, I would say the end of October, beginning of November, you know, we have been extremely busy in that area. And obviously we're having another increase in cases. I think it was last week or the week before last, we had an opening for our facility in Plantation. It's about 107,000 square feet. It's a medical office building. It has urgent care, diagnostic centers. We have a surgery center. We do radiation treatment for cancer. A large presence of our physician groups are there, and we opened that one up. So, you know, at least in the healthcare, we have continued to, you know, proceed because there's a need. And we're also seeing, you know, we've gone back to the drawing board, and we're looking at continuing to open up our urgent cares and our standalone emergency rooms, because we can see from our ERs that folks don't want to go there. They don't want to be exposed to maybe the general population. When you go to an urgent care or a standalone emergency room, they're not as busy. They're in your neighborhood. And so we've seen a large drive in community demand for that.
Let me ask you about the labor supply, which is something we touched on a little bit earlier. Unlike at the U, where they pulled back on some projects, you've gone full steam ahead. Have you been able to get the construction teams and all of the ancillary services that you've needed throughout this period? Clearly, with construction being an essential business, this is one sector that has continued to do pretty well during this period. Makes me wonder if you can find enough people to do the work you need.
We have been able to, amazingly. There are some challenge on some of the delivery of supplies and materials and some of the subcontractors, but we've been able to continue for the most part on time. And then, our plantation medical office building that we just opened, that was 200 new employees. And we were able to find those employees and hire them and onboard them. And we're going through the process of opening all those different departments. So we were concerned, I will be honest, during the summer with ICU nurses, critical care nurses, that has been a challenge.
Let's talk for a minute about the physicality of the offices, because I think we'll come back to this with everybody. As you have thought about health and safety concerns, and obviously in a hospital setting, you're always concerned about health and safety concerns, but maybe more so now in the office work scenario than in the past. What kind of changes have you made, or have you made any, that would be oriented toward workplace safety, particularly in the health and virus end of the universe?
So part of the role that my team has is we have our corporate administrative offices, and then we also have the facilities, and we call that the environment of care. And we have to, proceed with all Joint Commission, ACA, and federal regulations. What we've done is we've gone ahead, at least in the offices where corporate folks work, for the most part, we leave it open for every department. If you want to come in, what we've done is we have put up additional around workstations. We created higher barriers with plexiglass. We've created plexiglass, I like to call them barn doors, so people feel sealed in. We let staff know that in your department, this is how many people can be in this area at a time. As in reference to some of the same things at we have a company that comes in several times a week at night. Best way to describe it, they put on those bunny suits. Nobody needs to be in the area, and they kind of spray everything down. We've been doing the same thing with our air conditioning system, putting in UVA lighting, to protect folks. We put in a lot of things that, to challenge, any droplets that are in the area, trying to keep that. And then before you can enter any of our sites, your temperature is taken. If you're a Baptist employee, we have an app that we have to answer. And then like today, I got an interesting call from our employee health that I had been in contact with somebody that's tested COVID, positive for COVID yesterday. And so they were doing the tracers. And so they were letting me know that I had to come in contact with this person. The good news is I had, but we both had our masks on. We were separated by plexiglass. We had a short conversation. She works for me. And this is about my third time I've had this happen to me. I haven't gotten sick yet. So I think that a lot of the steps that we're doing to protect our employees and myself, are in place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in reference to our physician offices, telemedicine has been a huge increase in demand. So what we've done is we've created in a lot of the physician offices areas where doctors can still see patients, but also can see patients through telehealth. And then they make that decision based on, seeing them through a telehealth, should they come in. And so that's reduced the amount of people that are in our buildings.
Yeah, I can. I think I'd be probably accurate in guessing that most people on this call have used telehealth at least once during this period. I think at our household, we feel like we've got it on speed dial. So Coralie, you work in a less specialized universe. And I'm wondering, as you are talking to people about projects going forward, if companies are looking for greater space because they need to social distance, or are they talking about having less office space because is anybody ever going back to an office full time? What are you hearing from people?
With respect to River Landing, we do have approximately 150,000 square feet of office. And when we originally planned the space, there was several discussions of separating these spaces into smaller spaces. Post-COVID, the request is for larger space. Many of the lease discussions, we are currently in lease with 2 different tenants for the office space. All of the items that you've heard Kathleen talk about are things that are subject to our leases. The question regarding ventilation, the advantage of our office space, it happens to be on the 5th level. So that 5th level opens up to a balcony. So there's actual fresh air that can come into the spaces. That has been a positive for the individuals that are looking at that space. The request regarding the additional cleaning that would be required in the office spaces, the HVAC requests regarding the type of systems that are going to be put in, and the request by the landlords that these systems have the UV lights involved. And so what was once at River Landing floor plates that were rather large and posed a bit of a challenge in our leasing efforts are now attractive spaces because of the fact that they're larger and provide the opportunity to divide them as needed and create the spaces and the individual offices that are now in demand versus what we had seen before, which was what you were talking about, was the open spaces and the communal work environments that now have posed a challenge for people coming back.
And do you see the same demand for actual workspaces, office spaces as before, or are there people who are assuming that if not entirely, they're going to be working remotely in the future, that they will at least in part be working, accommodating remote workplaces? I mean, I think for a lot of us, this was an experiment to find out, would your employees be, running to the grocery or doing their laundry during work hours, or would they be, investing the hours in the job? And I think most people have been surprised to find that people sit down at the computer and don't get back up again very often.
Right. What we've seen at River Landing has been an increase of demand from the Northeast, individuals coming into the Miami market. It's transient. One of the other demands that we've seen and requests is, what is our generator power? Because of the demand on the technology, to the extent that we are also an area that has hurricanes and inclement weather, at River Landing, we have put in a separate generator exclusively for the office space so that that space will not go down. It's not simply a backup generator, but we'll keep the computers and the office operational even in the event of a storm or any other event that takes the electric down. So the technology components have also been in the forefront of many of the requests, because I do believe, back to one of your original questions, is what is here to stay, is I do believe that part of what we're going to see stay is the remote capacity. We have now, whether by choice or circumstance, have all learned how to manage our lives technologically. We are experts on Zoom and Teams and these platforms. And as a working parent, I think that has also provided an opportunity for us to be home, and we've had demands, juggling the 2 demands. So I think we're going to see a continued use of the remote working environments. Even as of today, although we are my office, we still keep it at 50%. We're conscious of making sure that we follow the CDC. And so many of our team members continue to work remotely. And I foresee that in the future, I think the fact, even what we wear, and many of us mentioned about how our clothes, many of us are dressing up for today. I think that will stay with us. We enjoy the opportunity to Zoom and do our backgrounds. So I think some of these things are here to stay, and we're seeing the requests coming in from our tenants in the office demand, taking into account some of these new realities that we think are going to be here to stay.
A friend of mine says it's business on top and party on the bottom. And I amend that to say business on top and jammies on the bottom a lot of days, but.
We won't ask anybody to stand up. Meetings.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. Christopher, when you look at the office spacing and conversations that you're having about rethinking at the U, are you taking remote working into that conversation in a way that might be different from what it was in the past?
Yeah, so the university has formed a task force to look at how we work. To date, I want to say that approximately 70% of our staff still remains remote university-wide. So our department, obviously being part of the essential workforce of construction, we've been in the office largely uninterrupted. We did move to a modified workforce in our office, rotational, to try and limit the capacity and the number of people that would be in the space at any given time. I mean, I think consistently, just like we're looking at when should people return, I think that also there is a question on who should return. You know, it's a real understanding and understanding the space needs and the constraints that anybody has. I think anyone would be foolish to not kind of take that approach and that look. So the university has formed a task force that is looking at how has the university performed in certain departments and certain sectors once it has gone remote. And in some areas, they're seeing some efficiencies and beginning to ask the questions on, is there a reason for those folks to be coming back, or can they truly stay remote? So that will have an effect too on space that may become available for either repurposing or renovation as well, which will then kind of affect our development and our capital planning.
So what happens with, we talked a little bit before about the old dorm scenario. And since I guess most of us on this call would once have time or another in our lives been captive in a dorm, possibly with a roommate who we might have not been our person of choice. What is going to happen to traditional style dorms? Are they going to continue to exist, or are those going to be retrofitted, reshaped? What's going to happen there?
So I can tell the university, especially as it relates to our freshman population, feel that a traditional style dorm is an important team community building element of going to college. Kids who come to college these days typically have grown up in their own bedrooms, right? So even when I grew up, I shared a room with my two brothers, so there was three of us. But a lot of the kids coming to college today haven't had that experience, and it's part of the transitioning from an at-home life to a campus community life. So we have not explored the reduction in our master plan for the housing as of right now of traditional style dorms. We have looked to expand our portfolio of different types of spaces, and like I said, the project we delivered in May added a lot of apartments and suites, which allowed us to decant some this semester. We did also still have, despite the times, a strong population of folks that wanted to room together and wanted to be allowed to have a roommate. So I think there'll always be a place for a traditional style dorm on a college campus. Obviously, a newer facility is always going to take a lot more account into the filtration, the air circulation, sanitization. I think that we're seeing a lot more, I don't think that the hand alcohol stations are ever going to go away. Another thing that we've seen too is I think we're going to see a shift towards a lot more outdoor dining. It's provided a lot of kind of relief for us. With all of the facilities that were impacted, indoor dining, some of our dining halls obviously had reduced capacity. A lot of our spaces that are for lease and that we had outside vendors, we could only serve food, and we ended up having to create outdoor dining spaces for these folks. And it actually, there was always this thought that it's so hot and it's uncomfortable. We found that people actually really enjoyed it. We've always had pockets of it throughout campus, but really we expanded the focus and it was heavily utilized this semester.
That's interesting. I know we've talked to some developers, commercial developers who were, it was much easier for them to lease spaces, dining restaurants with outdoor space than with not. Kathleen, it makes me wonder, you all, I think we forget sometimes that hospital systems are cities within cities, and you do have food outlets. And I'm sorry that I know many of your food outlets a little too well, perhaps. But what kind of impact has this had on your thinking around future dining facilities in the hospital environment or the medical environment?
So, you know, part of the challenge is getting vendors or food vendors that are national chains that want to come in. You know, they you know, when they don't understand that Baptist Hospital, our main, has 5,000 employees alone, not including, you know, patients and their families. And a lot of family members come to, we put in Sushi Maki, you know, during the pandemic, like we come to find out that a lot of the patients' families are running to Sushi Maki and bringing the food back to their family member in the hospital. So that's just a little example that you're absolutely right. It is like a mini city. And so that is our challenge. The thing that we are changing right now, obviously, is it's just grab and go. So it's just pre-made, and you have to pick whatever is out there, and that's all your choice is going to be. And then we try to do as much as possible, you know, touchless payment methods. But going forward, when we do design our facilities, we take a lot of time in looking at, you know, bringing in some type of food. And when you look at a standalone emergency room, you know, it's, let's say the first floor is 10,000 or a little bit bigger square feet. And of course, a lot of it is taken up by, you know, medical, but, you know, folks could be there for a while. So where we've gone is something that a lot of people see, like in airports, where you can go to a vending machine that's got fresh food. And, you know, Baptist is very much into wellness. It's got to be healthy. So if you want to, you know, try to get some potato chips, you're not going to find it there. You know, our wellness folks have taken them out of the vending machines.
Less temptation.
Yes. And so you use your credit card or whatever, and then you can open it and, you know, select a salad or a healthy wrap or something like that. You know, we put a lot of thought. There's a lot of conversation and meetings about coffee. That's all I can tell you, you know, and so trying to have selections for patients. I think we've done a really good job at our cancer, Miami Cancer Institute. Right now we had to take it away only because of COVID, and you can't, you know, those communal areas where you make your coffee and so forth. But when we're designing and planning, you know, our facilities, those are the things that we look at, knowing that we cannot get a vendor to, you know, come into some of our smaller facilities, but understanding that our patients could be there for 24 hours.
So let me ask all of you about another question, which is materials. And I think one of the things that we've, not just related to COVID, but there's more earth-friendly materials available than there would have been some years ago in building trades. Whether or not those are as staunch and sturdy, I don't know. That's not my corner of the universe. You all do know. And they're also, I think, you know, now we're thinking increasingly about climate change. You look at some buildings and my husband's an architect, so I've had many conversations about this, about, you know, materials that don't hold up well against salt, that don't hold up in a lot of different kinds of scenarios, or not as well as you might have wished. I'm wondering, and now you have questions around how porous are materials in terms of transmission of viruses. So what do you see from the technical side and the construction side that might be different that you're considering if it's not already here? And Coralie, I'll start with you.
When we designed River Landing, our building is to a LEED Silver. So many of our bathroom features, we started with the water conservation. So many of our water and our bathrooms, we requested that all the tenants use LEED certified to reduce the water intake. In addition, the paint was another item in the paints that we were using, to be mindful of that. In our construction materials, that was really in the hands in many cases to our GC. In our case, we're concrete, steel, and precast in our buildings, in all 3 of our buildings. But one thing that we did focus on, if you come to River Landing, and we hope you do, is that we always viewed one of the destination aspects of River Landing was our river walk. And one thing we placed a lot of focus was in plantings and in the trees. So as you walk River Landing, our canopy of trees is significant. They're fully immature trees. So what we did is, at the commencement of the project, we acquired the trees and we grew them in the farm during the length of construction. So by the time we were ready to make the plantings, the trees were mature. So as you come to River Landing, there's this, the temperature drops dramatically, which on the river walk, as you walk it, it could be about 10 degrees cooler because you're by the water and near these mature trees. This has also served as a marketing camp, and helpful to our restaurants, which are all across that patio. And especially in COVID, is an area that we expect, and the restaurants we're talking to will make heavy use of these patios that are covered by the trees and by the restaurants. We continue to try to work with our retailers at River Landing to be mindful of the products that are being used in the project.
Sounds great. Christopher, what are you doing around physical plant materials, construction materials? And I'm suspecting that everybody, but perhaps you in particular, are looking at more infrastructure related to high-speed, super high-speed internet. I know 5G to be the buzzword, but not sure that's exactly where we're going to end up.
Yeah, so general sustainability and resiliency has always been a focus of the university. So we too have LEED standards that we follow. We typically aim for a minimum of silver, and we traditionally get gold or platinum. We do have renewable energy both on site. The university has also entered into a solar program with FPNL. Additionally, in the design of our buildings, we look in several scenarios for Code Plus. There's a lot of situations in which we'll actually, in the new dorms, which are in planning right now, we've actually raised the ground floor above floodplain. And then additionally, we've taken all the critical infrastructure and actually put it up on a mezzanine level, kind of as a precursor for a potential sea level rises issue and sustainability and storm surge. A lot of people don't realize that the lake that's in the center of the University of Miami campus is connected to the Gables Waterway, which goes directly out to the bay. So storm surge and storms are always a concern for the university. And that's kind of our heart, the aquatic center of campus. Materiality wise, we're already using a lot of non-porous materials, and there definitely is a focus to continue to go with that. We've also looked into some electrostatic coatings that can be applied to existing materials that we have on campus that will provide antimicrobial surfaces, even if you started with something that wasn't necessarily that way. So the university has always kind of been heavily involved in this sphere. We've also begun to look at well buildings, where buildings are designed in a way that promote wellness and physical activity. Look at the way that different color light spectrums affect the way people work, live, and sleep. So yeah, the university, outside of some of the actual retrofits that we've been doing, we haven't landed on any hard decisions on materiality changes that we are implementing as a result of the current, but the university has always been on that trend of pushing forward with what comes out and keeping more sustainable, more natural materials and products in our area.
It's a far cry from where some of us started out, where asbestos was a standard building material in schools and all institutional buildings. So I think in the old Miami Herald building, we had our quotient, and my office actually used to be part of the electrical closet, which was always wondering if I was setting myself up for a future that I hadn't quite envisioned, but it all worked out just fine. I'm going to come back to you, Kathleen, on physicality and materiality. But first, I just want to remind everybody that we are going to open up for Q&A pretty quickly here. And if you will put those questions into not the chat part, where they probably won't get seen, but into the Q&A part. And we will be glad to pick them up from there. And I know we've got a lot of interesting and smart people on this call, so I'm looking forward to hearing what questions you have. Kathleen, let's flip back here to the materiality and physicality, and start first with, okay, you build in a lot of places. You've got all these urgent care centers. You're dealing with places nonstop that are probably have different kinds of building conditions, flood levels. We all know South Florida's what beneath the surface is pretty important. Has any of this affected how you all are thinking about construction and the materials you use?
Well, the first thing, Jane, is, COVID has had us look at things differently, but we've always looked at, we call it our patient experience. So we always look, and remember, hospitals and, medical facilities have to stay open even during hurricanes. And I guess I'll use the example of our Fisherman's Hospital. We purchased that hospital in June 1st, and September, Hurricane Irma hit us. And so we're rebuilding it. And we've taken into that, flooding. And our Mariners Hospital, the same thing. Right when I came to Baptist a number of years ago, we were putting in, mechanisms to protect the hospital from flooding and so forth. Of course, in the Keys, we do close our hospitals at some point and try to encourage everybody also in the Keys to please go north. But at least these two hospitals can reopen as soon as the state will allow us to go back. And then we've done the same thing in our Miami Beach location. It's the same thing. When it was under design and development, we were looking at flooding. We know that once a storm passes or the king tides pass, we need to get back into our buildings and take care of patients. As to just development in general, every time we have a new project, the team comes back around. So we have, the architects there, but we also have the folks that work in those facilities. So when we're going to build, let's say, another urgent care, we bring in, the nurses, the doctors, the leadership team that are working in there, and they tell us, this particular product does work, didn't work, and so forth. So that the next time we do this, we're always trying to improve the process. And at the bottom of every project is, as we say, the patient experience. When you walk in, of course you want, a doctor and a nurse to take care of you, but everybody needs to take into account, how do those doors get open? How is the environment of care? Remember, my team, we deal with the infection control. So all of these components are included in your patient experience.
And I want to ask you about another thing before we start to go to some of the questions in the chat here, which is you all have announced that you're developing a residential building that will have, and I apologize, I think it's a senior living facility, senior living. It's here in Coral Gables. I'm in Coral Gables, so that's why I said here. And it's near Merrick Park. This is your first residential building for Baptist, if I'm correct, and would like to know how this is a different kind of project for you and where you see that going in the future. Are there going to be more residential buildings associated with Baptist and other medical facilities?
So it's twofold. I mean, healthcare facility systems across the United States are looking at diversification. A number of years ago, as the population ages, our reimbursement with Medicare and insurance is going down. And so to cover our expenses, we're looking to diversify. Baptist opened up a hotel. It's run by Hilton a number of years ago. And now we're going into senior living. And we spent a large amount of time looking for the right partner. We picked Belmont Village, and they're out of Texas, Dallas, Texas. And we partnered with them. I was very lucky to have found the location that we have there by Merrick Park. And on the first floor of our facility, we have opportunities for, wellness, not only for the residents there, but for the community, for Coral Gables and surrounding. And so it's a combination, we can do the medical, and also a big emphasis on this development is memory care. So, part of our market research is, we don't have memory care, especially in the Gables area. And on a personal note, my father grew up in Coral Gables, ran his business in Coral Gables, and when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, we didn't have any facility for him to age, at home. So, and on a personal note, that was very important for me to have that presence in the Gables.
That sounds great. Thank you. And I as somebody who lives in Coral Gables, of course, I'm aware of the fact that we'd all best never get old, if you ask me. But we have a question here in the Q&A, and Coralie, you're probably a good person for this. The question is, what impact is COVID expected to have on development in the 3 to 5 year frame? And I know we've already seen, for instance, that there has been a preference for single family housing over multifamily, although that seems to be leveling out a little bit. There's always a question about, can the market absorb as much retail as is required under Miami 21, given the fact that the retail, Amazon's delivering my liquid plumber. What do we think is, from where you sit, what do you think happens in the next 3 to 5 years in Miami in terms of development?
I would love to be to forecast, but I can tell you what we're considering now at River Landing. I think the footprints that we had at River Landing for retail were significant. We at River Landing is the discount retailers, which I think they don't survive on the Amazon of the world. And so part of their lure is the shopping experience and the treasure hunting that goes on when you go to the Ross and to the TJs and the Burlingtons of the world. As we look forward, we do and are aware of the significant number of individuals moving from other areas into Miami. So we believe that there is going to be an increased demand for the residential product in Miami. I also think that many people are coming to Miami and are going to be working both in a remote capacity. And so as we are in the initial stages of our next project, some of the things that we're considering is the reality where individuals are looking for a living environment that provides for live and work in your apartment. So things such as having a bathroom located at the very beginning of your door. If you work out and you come into the house and many people need to change or don't want to come into the house dressed in the way they are. A wellness environment, I think that is something that's going to be important. So we're looking at that. The fresh air components into our units is something that we continue to look at. We do in our next project, our residential component will be minimized because it will take advantage of its surrounding neighborhoods. I think we're looking more to the community, a more walkable environment, an environment where people are staying home for longer periods of time, and how can you, in co-working, many of us do not live alone. So how do you develop these new apartments and living environments so that multiple people can be working at home? Many of us, I'm sure, have had the experience where you're hosting a Zoom and you're dealing with the other things that may be going on in your home. So that's something that we continue to consider. What we've been told by our retailers is, due to what they're seeing at River Landing, they are still looking for new products in Miami. So I think at least in the discount retailer side, which is what we've been most familiar with now, there's still a demand. And I think in the multifamily, we're in the initial phases of our next project. And so we're looking forward to all these individuals that are moving down to Miami from other markets.
Well, you asked question, or you mentioned a question that I want to ask just a little bit more about, and that's, does the residential product now need to have a home office? I think about so many of my colleagues who have, as you've alluded to, had sort of like one hand on a computer and another hand on the forehead of a kid trying to, tackle them. And is the home office going to be just what people expect now, whether it's multifamily or single family?
In our design, we are taking that into account. Originally, when we started River Landing, the open floor plans were what people were looking for. Now the opportunity to be able to go into either a separate room or a separate location, to have some privacy or separation. Even if you live alone, having to remain home for long periods of time, having the opportunity psychologically to be able to move from your bedroom to a different space, the opportunity to have, at River Landing, we have very large balconies, and our feedback from many of our residents is that that has been a huge amenity for them, being able to open up. We have floor to ceiling sliding glass doors. So many of those units are in demand, the 2-bedroom units. One of the biggest questions we actually are sitting on right now as we plan our next project is, what is our mix? Are we going to do the micro units, which we have not done and we probably will not? What is the size of the 1-bedroom, taking into account, do we need to provide a space that for the remote environment and the work from home? And then is the product really the 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom with a smaller 1-bedroom to provide that space for the individuals? And we do believe that the demand will be, because this remote environment is going to be with us, that's what the market may be looking for in the new product.
Okay. This was something that we have alluded to throughout each of your answers, but we have a request for more specifics. So Christopher, I'll come your way with this, and that is specifics around enhanced ventilation strategies. Are there particular types of filtration? Are you looking more at outdoor space? What exactly are, we talked a little bit about materiality. What are some of the specific strategies you are pursuing for filtration?
Yeah, so with a lot of our projects, especially the new developments, we're already using fairly high filtration that are just requirements associated with those. And those are addressing a lot of the airborne. So a lot of MERV 13 filtration that's required for the mechanical systems. Additionally, to achieve a higher efficiency, we're using rooftop outdoor air units, where we are circulating air and pre-filtering it and then allowing that outside air to be pumped into individual spaces throughout the building. So in some of our buildings and a lot of our buildings, we've gone to a very tight envelope with limited operational windows in them. And one of the interesting things comes up over and over is whether or not that is limiting people's access to outside air. The reality is the method in which the university has taken to approach outside air and filtration allows us to pump consistent and constant fresh air throughout an entire building, rather than rely on individual occupants to go throughout their spaces and open and close windows or get access. So it actually allows us to provide fresh outdoor air to folks that might otherwise not seek it out for themselves. It also creates a dual filtration process throughout, and then allows us to get a higher energy efficiency from our units, and then a tighter envelope, which helps with the insulation.
Okay, Kathleen, I'm sure that at the medical level, you have very specific filtration systems that you use. What are those? What's the state of the art in your industry now?
So, you know, when we're designing them, I mean, our design and our plans have to be approved by ACA, which is a state agency. And from there, you know, there also have to follow other federal regulations. And specifically, they're very similar to what Christopher described. There's not much difference, but it goes through a long regulation approval process before we can even start to finish our design and then submit for permits. So, and then it goes back to what I talked about earlier, the environment of care, and it's all very regulated.
Okay. Coralie, as you are in your multifamily in particular, I've heard some multifamily developers talk about changing filtration systems, upgrading them. What's your experience with filtration systems in the multifamily and the office environment?
In the office environment right now, our unit in the office tenants are leading the charge in the demands of what they're asking for. So many of the things that Chris was talking about are the things that are being discussed now. In many cases with the tenants we've been dealing with, it's been the question of what is the best system. And since many of these items are new, In many cases, one of our tenants reached out to the medical industry to find out what they were doing as a guide as to what was the best to apply into our office spaces. And so as we work with this tenant, one of the items they want to have open discussions about is the filtration systems and what is it that we are going to put in to these office spaces. The two items that they've been talking about is the filtration system as well as the fresh air intakes and then the UV lights, and whether or not some combination of all of them or some of them is the best protection for the office environment. In our residential side, the project was designed and built and all the air conditioning systems installed prior to COVID. And so right now, in collaboration with our real estate team that's handling the residential side, we're looking into how any of these systems can be upgraded to provide any additional protections that the residents are going to be asking for.
Okay. We have a really interesting question here, and it sometimes it sort of feels like a really Miami question, though I suspect if I were sitting in any other city in the US, I might be asking the same question. And it relates to permitting and plan review. And the question really is, okay, during this period, as a lot of what a lot of municipal departments did is they went to private vendors to either take over their review or to facilitate it. And the question's just, how was, from your standpoint, each of you as someone who does deal with permitting and review, how has the outside vendor scenario worked? Has it been efficient and effective, or has it slowed things? Is it any different? What have you seen, Chris?
So we work in a few different municipalities, and obviously we work with the county as well. So Coral Gables, Miami-Dade County, and a little bit with unincorporated Miami-Dade. So we have both the water and sewer and Durham for our permitting. And based on which of those groups, they've all done different things. Miami-Dade County shut down permitting inspections for a while when they had an issue out at their inspection center. We were able to very quickly pivot and hire on some of our architects and engineers to come out and perform those inspections. So I think they did a pretty good job of outlaying that process, and it was very easy to adapt. I would say that overall, inspection wise, we haven't really had any issues with anything that's ongoing, whether it's either through city, county, or private forces. I would say that the largest change that we've seen is access to plan reviewers has become a little more cumbersome. Even if they are not working remotely and they are working, say, at City Hall, there's not the same type of where we could go down and meet with them. The city has done well at adapting and been open to setting up Zooms, and similarly with the county. For the county, a lot of those folks with Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer and Durham, I believe, continue to work remotely. So phone calls are not as easy to make, but emails are generally being responded to very quickly. So that's one of the major shifts that we've kind of seen, is more on the plan review side. And those municipalities that are still requiring or still have physical plan submission requirements, some of them have now plans quarantining requirements, where you would typically go drop it off and it would be immediately routed. It now will have to sit for a period of time while it remains in its own quarantine before it can be circulated.
That's particularly interesting since they've said that inert surfaces are not a primary, distribution for the virus. Kathleen, I don't know what kind of interaction, when you have a facility as big and varied as Baptist, that you have with the permitting officials, but I can't imagine that anybody gets out of the permitting game without interaction. Have the private vendors made any appreciable difference, pro or con, from where you sit? Does it vary by municipality?
So there's a lot of different answers to this. So we kind of look at the project and we look at the municipality we're in, and we have a department that we work closely with, the real estate team, and it's our government relations. So I think a lot of times municipalities, especially when Baptist is going into a new community, to understand what we're going to do. So they're very instrumental. They have those relationships with, City Hall. And we come in, we talk about our projects, we show other things that we've done similarly. And then from there, and then we continue to have meetings with staff. Now going to where we are currently in our current situation is similar to, like Christopher said, we have a number of Zoom calls and meetings and so forth. And then back to, do we use an outside vendor to help, process us through? For our senior living project, we are using an outside vendor to help, bring through our plans and so forth. But before we even did that, I think there was maybe a year or 2 years, we spent a lot of time going to the city of Clark Gables, meeting with them, having them understand what we wanted to do in our project. And they were very open to tell us what they envisioned. So, back and forth until we could put those plans together. So I really believe any new place, we're very active in Palm Beach right now. And it's the same thing. It's every community is different. Then the county of Palm Beach needs to understand what we do. And so I think it's a lot of going to visit with them. Granted, we can't do it now, but we can do it through Zoom.
Coralie, the River Landing's obviously in the city. How is this has been such a strange time for permitting and review. How has it worked out? And have you seen things that you think will be long-term changes in the system?
At River Landing, we had a third-party provider that assisted us with the plans processing, as well as the plans review process, and then our inspections. We did it for both our base building as well as each and every one of our tenants. We also had a permit expediter as well to assist us with our permits. We found the process invaluable, particularly during coronavirus and the pandemic. The city was amazing, and even though they were working from home, they were a great partner along with our third-party providers in getting through what I consider some of the most difficult parts of the project, which is closing them out and getting these final permits. So we found the ability to have a private inspection company coming out, particularly because we had to call them regularly. We had to be mindful of making sure that only one inspector was going out, who was going to be present at that time. So the coordination, it was very helpful to be able to do that with a third-party person versus the city, because they also were understaffed and they were trying to manage the new reality as well. At the times that we needed the city, what we did at River Landing is we had meetings that we set up ahead of time. And so what we were able to do from the beginning, since the city was aware of where we were at, they collaborated with us in setting meetings with us along the way, so that we would have set times to be able to speak to them about any issues that may be going on. So with respect to both our base building and our tenants, and each of our tenant spaces, we used this process, and we did find that, but for that, we probably would have been, our delay may have been even greater.
Terrific. And I think you're probably going to be the person for our last question, which is one of the things that we've seen in this period, as back in May and June, we thought we'd never sell another piece of property on the residential side ever. Here we sit in November, and we are at the highest median house price that we've been in at 426 here in Miami-Dade. Condos median sales prices are rising as well. And the question that has to come up here is affordability and accessibility. It's not all affordable housing, though that is certainly an important topic and a critical topic for a service economy like ours, but also with general just affordability. So where do you see, as you look around, either projects you're considering or the broader market, because you're in touch with all of that, where do you see the trend line? Is it toward rentals? Is it toward condos? Is it towards small houses so that people, there is an affordability issue here, and what are you seeing in those terms?
Our company primarily focuses on the rental product. And so we have, as I mentioned before, started the process of our next project that would be a rental project as well, similar to River Landing. Our company as a whole looks into areas that are untapped. We're not in the condo market, so it's different. I do as we've spoken to other developers, we have seen many of the projects that were put on hold are now announcing that they're launching in the condo environment as well. And so I do believe that we have the demand for the more affordable and rental product, as well as we have these individuals moving from other areas, corporate relocations that may be happening. The office tenant that we're dealing with is actually a corporate relocation from the Northeast, which will not only bring the corporate headquarters down to Miami, but also brings all the individuals with them that would come to Miami. And so one of the reasons they are looking at River Landing is because of the multifaceted aspect of River Landing, where you can live, you can work here, there's dining, there's grocery that can provide this lifestyle. From my friends in the community, we have seen that there is a demand for the homes, for some individuals moving from different areas of the community. So the prices of homes are going up. One of the things I was recently told was the concerns about our demands on our schools for the different individuals that are moving to Miami, where the children will be going to different schools. For our product in particular, we're looking at the apartment side of it, and we're aware that other of the developers in our community are starting to look into this product type as well.
Okay. Terrific. I want to thank all of our panelists today for your time and all of those who have joined us. There's going to be breakout sessions starting at 4:30. And I'm going to turn it over to Carol to talk more about that. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jane. What a wonderful job. It's always great to have you. Thank you for the support of the chamber and all that you do. Great program.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank our panelists as well. What a wonderful job. And it's very optimistic to hear Coralie talk about new to market businesses. So the chamber's here to support them and you, and we're glad that the project is so underway and so successful. We wish you the best to the very end here.
Thank you very much.
And Christopher, thank you for being so in touch with the students, because this is our future. The dorm life, some of them have to struggle through that, but the campus is beautiful and your team make it so inviting, and the leadership from the university making it safe and providing options. So go you, and we thank you for all you're doing to help grow our community and keep the technology and the educated individuals to stay here in Miami.
Thank you.
Kathleen will be part of the breakout that I'm going to be involved in momentarily. So I hope that you'll see that the general session is coming to an end, but shortly we're going to allow you to log on to respective breakouts. So you could have a little more of an interaction with each of our panelists. So please choose one of the 3 breakouts if you have not already. And on the chat is access to sign up for one of them. Also, I want to thank very much the chamber leadership, Alfred and Tanya. You have set up a great team with Stephanie, and most thankful for Christina for all your work that you helped us through this entire program this year. And lastly, before I sign off and bring the breakout session to start momentarily, I wanted again thank our sponsors, Grant Thornton and Thornton Construction, FIU, and our lead supporter, as always, in the real estate committee. We're very grateful to Ocean Bank. So thank you all for all of our great sponsors. And I ask you, if you're not active with the opportunities that we have here at the chamber in our community, join the real estate committee and or another committee at the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. We'll be very happy to have you as the vice chair of real estate, and Mark, our chair. We'd love to have you become more active and see you often. So with that, I'm going to sign off on time. I ask you all to sign on punctually. We're going to now begin our program on the breakouts at 4:30. So we'll give you 2 to 3 minutes to jump on to the new program. We will not be reconvening as a general session. So for those that cannot join us, we say goodbye, but we hope you'll stay. Jane, Coralie, Kathleen, and Christopher, thank you again. What a great program. We all enjoyed it. Everybody stayed on. Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.